The last speaker you're going to hear tonight, besides David and I, has a very special story. You know how you see things happen over time, and you know that this is going somewhere good, but it ain't there yet. That's what you're going to hear about. And the reason that Kevin's here is because last year's recipient in this group was not able to be here tonight. So there's a good reason for Kevin to be here, and I suspect that he's going to tell you what that is, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So Dave did ask me to introduce Rich Speeney tonight. I first met Rich, I think it was at lunch. His business was around the corner from mine, and I don't know, somehow we ran into each other over there, and we got to talking, and very quickly I introduced him to the concept of C12, and his brother was there, and we just had a great conversation about that, and like there was no sales effort needed. He was a man that knew what he was about and what God had for him. So, in fact, I can tell you that if you watch him closely, he knows, he actually has a mission statement for his life. And while it's been a while since we've commuted to the Caleb group together, probably a couple years, I can still remember basically what that was, you know, and it is to honor God with his life through the stewarding of his business, whatever that is, and to use his entrepreneur skills to grow and influence the world around him through those specific skills. And that's what he does. I was really kind of sad when he sold the business around the corner. It was kind of fun running into those guys over there and, you know, getting the lift of the fellowship. But anyway, without further ado, here is a member of a wonderful family that has entrepreneurship in their veins, and they just can't stop. But praise God that it's on track for whatever he has for them. Rich?
Thank you, Kevin. I miss being in Newtown also. Drive to Bensalem's tough. Better? Well, thank you. I really appreciate you all choosing me for this award tonight. It really means a lot coming from you all. You know, one of the characteristics of the award was somebody who gives back the most, and I feel a little guilty being here because I feel like I've been much more on the receiving side than on the giving side. And sort of as I was preparing, I just sort of looked back to 5 years ago when I was going through so much pain and all the help that you all provided for me, from Cindy volunteering to take me to the bank and proactively tell them how grossly out of compliance I was on a $10 million loan, which proved to be very wise, to Kevin sitting in the car for hours and hours listening to me talk about all the problems that I had, to Greg Lesher, who's not here, just praying for me in the shower all the time, as he says, to my one-on-ones with Dave, and just so many other calls and emails. Even just recently was in the middle of a healthcare crisis, and I reached out to you all, and within 24 hours I had 6 months worth of advice on my desk. So I really appreciate everything you've all done for me. But as great as you all are, you really are a distant second to my wife. As I sort of go through all these crazy struggles over the last 27 years, she's pretty solid and been there for me the whole time. So thank you. So most of you know my story. Some of you may not, but I showed up thanks to an invitation from Kevin to C12 in the early part of 2013. I presented you with a company that had a $10 million debt, and we were out of compliance on the loan. We were losing $50,000 a month, and my brother and I were not taking a paycheck. And you all's jaws dropped to the floor. But my first day at C12, I learned what a KPI was. Prior to that, I had no idea what it was. I learned all about accountability and the importance of metrics and measurements. I saw how other Christian businessmen and women handled their businesses, and contemplated leaving at lunchtime. I was so convicted that I needed to make a change instantly. But I waited till the end, and I got home and I researched and I started making changes, and people's attitudes in the company started changing. People were starting to become accountable to one another. Improvements were made in every area of the company. And in a relatively short period of time, the company made a major turnaround. We got back in compliance with the bank. We got back on the payroll, and we started actually seeing profits like we had never seen before. And we did all of this without raising the sales of the company one penny. During this process, my brother had been very frustrated and tired of the business and wanted to relocate to North Carolina. Plus, we had equity partners that owned a portion of the company who had wanted to sell their shares for a long time. So there was the pressure and the opportunity to sell, so we did. In August of 2014, we sold the company. My brother moved to North Carolina, and our partners got their money and were happy. I stayed and actually worked with the company until March of 2016, and then I left. So there I was in March of 2016, windblown from a 3-year roller coaster, but sitting there with no debt, no responsibility, no HR issues, no payroll to meet, and honestly not a real pressing need to work. So what was I going to do? It was kind of like when you take that last final in college, only on steroids. So tonight's theme is world changers. So I just thought that I would sort of explain to you the process that I went through in March of 2016 with the hopes that maybe it would encourage you or spark an idea in you and how you can make change in your lives. So this is what happened. There I was. I began praying and seeking God's direction in my life. I feel that He has a certain purpose for each one of us, and I wanted to know what that was. So I dove into His Word. And the first verse I came to was Luke 12:16. A verse I'm sure you're all familiar with. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I'll store up my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for yourself for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then you will get what you prepared for yourself. And this is how it will be with whoever stores up treasures for themselves, but is not rich towards God. Then a little further down in Luke, in verse 47 and 48, the servant who knows his master's will and does not readily do what the master wants him to do will be beaten with many blows. But the one who does not know what to do and deserves punishment will be beaten with few blows. For everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. Then in Romans 12:6-8, we have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. If your gift is prophesying, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. If it is serving, then serve. If it is teaching, then teach. If it is to encourage, then give encouragement. If it is to give, then give generously. If it is to lead, do it diligently. And if it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. All of us in this room have different gifts. And lastly, 1 Peter 4:10, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. So for me, those 4 verses sort of tied things together. Don't even think about sitting around and doing nothing, even though that was the advice of all my non-Christian friends. Much has been given to you, so much is demanded. We all have gifts given to us by grace, and we need to use those gifts to serve others. So quickly out of that came my mission statement, as Kevin said, is to use my entrepreneurial gifts from the Lord to encourage and impact the lives of others. So as I started looking around for a career and how I was going to do this, opportunities came about in the private equity world as far as I really did enjoy that 5-month process with Cindy and her company of selling MRI and got a Harvard education in that process. But then I figured I would just be reading prospectuses and visiting companies and not really rubbing shoulders with people on a day-to-day basis, and didn't feel that would be a good place to fulfill my mission. I thought about doing consulting and helping other companies with metrics and measurements as I did in my company, but again, I felt that the relationships would be short-term and I would be jumping from company to company. Most of the people that were close to me sort of just assumed and asked, why don't you just take over the company that your dad owns? And I just, for many reasons, just really had no interest in doing that. So I went out and I did something a little unusual. I hired a proactive broker, somebody who actually went out and started making phone calls to businesses and looking for a company that would be interested in selling somewhere in the area. And amazingly, very quickly, a very good opportunity came up. It was a printing company, something I knew something about. It was close to my house. I could afford it. And I was getting excited about it. And as we got into the due diligence, I learned that 60% of their sales and most of their proactive efforts and energy around the company were around printing tickets for the casino industry. And at first I sort of said, okay. And then as we sort of got into it, I just felt very convicted that the Lord didn't want me spending most of my time and energy profiting from the gambling industry. So I told the broker I wanted to pass and keep looking. And ironically, shortly after that, he came with another company that looked very good as well. So we started diving into the due diligence there. This was around May of this year. And in that process, my dad approached me and said, are you sure you really want to do this, and would you consider taking my company? And again, at first, I really didn't have much of an interest. And from some coercing from my brother, I said, all right, let's talk about it, but can we all agree that we'll take a minimum of 30 days to pray about this and talk about it before we make any decisions? And they all agreed to do that. But as you know, as we got into that conversation, I got more and more confident and excited that this was the right thing to do. And as of July 1st, I took over at Presto Tape. It's only been 7 months, but we have a lot of really good things going on. Paul and Amy are up and rolling now and making some great introductions and relationships with people. We have 5 couples going to the marriage weekend by Family Life this coming weekend. I offered that at my old company and I had none. And we're getting ready to launch a financial peace class for the employees, and wasn't able to find a teacher for that, and Dave gave a reference. Long story short, you know, a retired CEO from Comcast is going to teach the course for us, and we're going to start that very shortly. The company is doing well. We've made a couple improvements in the company, and profits are increasing, and we've pretty much have everyone committed that we are going to allocate 10% of our profits this year to give outside the company, and still think that employee wages and bonuses will be at an all-time high. So, in summary, I feel my world-changing call is to use my gifts from God to run a profitable company that will have a kingdom impact on people. There's still lots of stress, frustration, and confrontation, all things that I hate. But the joys of some of the good things that are happening make it all worth it. So my challenge for all of you, and for myself as well, is to remind ourselves of Buck's favorite saying: God will always give you everything you need to do all he wants you to do. Thanks.